All right, good evening. My name is Father Christopher Vorderbruggen. Thank you for joining me. This is not a particularly religious space in the sense of prayers and devotions, although it is still me, so we will be talking from my perspective. I hope this is coming through all right. I didn't go actually to listen yet to see if it is sounding good. What we're going to do tonight is we are going to encounter this person, Lindsay Clancy, and I will tell some of her story. I've done some research on it. Now, I want to say one of the primary reasons that I'm even encountering this story at all is because of the public's encounter with Lindsay, the tragic death of her kids, and then the influencer narrative that has come up all around. And so what's happened is everyone has got an opinion. And these opinions can be actually detrimental to our soul. Now, that doesn't mean thinking itself is detrimental, but what can be detrimental is when we go beyond that, when we start placing ourselves in the story or placing ourselves in a place of judgment or et cetera, et cetera. So, we're going to do this in steps tonight, and I'm so grateful for whoever will be here. By the way, at any time, you'll be able to go back and watch this from the beginning on YouTube and on Twitter. Now, there is a way for you to comment if you would like to interact with me, and I will do my best to be able to try to see your chat. So why don't we do this? We can have one more hymn or something like that. Now, I realize I said it's not going to be religious. It's not. But we're going to talk about this. In fact, we'll just start now and see who comes in. So we're talking tonight about Lindsay Clancy. She was born Lindsay Marie Musgrove, August 11th, 1990. And I want to go through some of her bios so that she becomes a real person. Okay, not just an internet meme or whatever they call it. We are talking about a real person who is on trial for the rest of her life right now. And you don't need to have a position on her one way or another. And so please understand. So she was born Lindsay Marie Musgrove, August 11th, 1990. She was raised in Wallingford, Connecticut. Her parents, her mom and dad, are Paula and Michael Musgrove. Now, if you've been watching the trial or if you've read anything about her, her parents are actively in her life right now. That top of the line attorney she has, Mr. Reddington, was hired by her parents, who basically have put up everything that they've ever had. Their savings, they put that up. So Paula and Michael Musgrove, the mom and dad of Lindsay, are actively in her life today. She has a sister named Allison. If you've read anything about it, Allison is also in her life and has been in her life through the whole process. Lindsay attended Lyman Hall High School. She graduated from Quinnipiac University in 2012 with a degree in biology. She earned a nursing degree from the MGH Institute of Health Professions in Boston. I don't know what that stands for. She became a licensed nurse in Massachusetts in 2014. During nursing school, reportedly received prescriptions for Prozac and Wellbutrin. Now, that came out as a detail in the trial. Marriage and nursing career. She met Patrick Clancy in 2013. They were married in December of 2016. She worked as a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Her co-workers described her as compassionate and attentive to patients. A co-worker testified that when Lindsay heard about a mother who killed her children, she cried and asked how a mother could do such a thing. They brought up a lot of this in trial. So a lot of these details are coming out in trial. Ironically, quite a bit actually from prosecution witnesses, which was not the prosecution in any kind of a very serious criminal trial is not trying to humanize the person. So you'll hear oftentimes prosecution won't use a defendant's name. They'll say the defendant or Ms. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, whoever's on trial. And that's an obvious attempt to not necessarily dehumanize, but certainly not to emphasize someone's humanity. But what ended up happening was so many of the prosecution witnesses who came to testify and did for the prosecution on cross-examination by Lindsay's attorney actually, were able to talk about this and humanize her very much. So Cora, the first child of Lindsay and Patrick, was born December 24th, 2017. Lindsay experienced postpartum anxiety, it was reported. Particularly struggled with prospect of returning to work and being separated from her daughter. In fact, it came out that at some point, her husband, her ex-husband, Patrick, actually testified saying that, and I don't remember which birth it was, after one of the births, it might have been after Dawson, the next, which we'll talk about in a second, that actually, yeah, I did read your comment, Larry, but we're talking about this tonight. I know it can be uncomfortable. That after one of the births, and the prospect of going back to her nursing career was starting to cause her a lot of anxiety, and she communicated that to her husband, saying, she didn't know what would happen if she went back to the kids. Essentially, this is all me paraphrasing this a lot. And so that developed very early on after the birth of the first two kids. All right, Dawson was born September 20th, 2019. It was known to be a physically difficult delivery, so labor was not easy. She experienced more significant postpartum anxiety, was reportedly offered Zoloft, but declined. She briefly saw a therapist, so that's after child number 2. And again, most of this data is coming from information from the actual trial. Callan was born on May 26, 2022. Patrick described the initial period after Callan's birth as happy. Lindsay never returned to nursing, so this was it. After this child was born in 2022, she didn't return to nursing. Her mental health deteriorated as maternity leave continued. So something happened. And, these are one of those things that we don't know. And of course, the trial itself is trying to bring it out. But when it comes to someone's heart and their everything, by the way, if someone wouldn't mind saying hi from X, I just want to see if your comments are coming through here, because they might not. And unfortunately, I don't know how. If someone from X knows how to do that, because I'm seeing, actually, I'm only seeing comments coming in from YouTube. And by the way, people on X, sometimes people will tell me that the experience on YouTube with these live streams is actually better. Okay. September 2022, anxiety intensified, experienced insomnia, racing thoughts, exhaustion, poor appetite, and depression. Began treatment with psychiatrist Dr. Jennifer Tufts. So if you've been watching the trial, you've probably heard that name. Okay. So Callan was born in May of 2022. And by the time the story gets to September of that same year, the anxiety was ramping up and she wasn't sleeping. And remember, she was not going to ever return back to nursing. October 2022, started Zoloft, reportedly increased anxiety and raising thoughts after a dosage change, which these sorts of medications, and the unfortunate part with these psychiatric medications, whatever your position on them is that they can affect everybody differently. So it's trial and error. And so you really have to see how someone's going to respond to it. and they're either going to take it well, nothing will happen, or you'll have very serious side effects. And sometimes the side effects are modest and will go away after a little bit. Oftentimes they don't. Back to October 2022, she discontinued Zoloft. So she started it in October and discontinued. Ativan was among the medications subsequently recommended. Okay, by November 2000, and by the way, if you're just joining us, the reason I'm going through this is because there is such a social media narrative. So you've got people out there who are absolutely speaking what I would describe as terribly about her. And then you have a whole nother wing who is almost cheerleading her on. Then you have kind of a balanced wing in the middle of people who are trying to understand her mental health battle and journey, what happened. Then, of course, you have people who just aren't following along at all. But I wanted to research a little bit before we came in tonight, and just so I could give you this timeline kind of without passion or emotion to kind of humanize the situation, all right? November of 2022. So remember, the last baby, Callan, was born in May of 2022. As she was going through her maternity leave from nursing, at some point, the decision was made by her, or her health deteriorated to a point where she never returned to nursing. Okay, so last baby was born in May of 2022. We're now in November. Severe insomnia. If you listen to the court and you listen to some of the experts and people who had encountered her during this time period, one of the most frequent things you heard was insomnia. She wasn't sleeping, and there was nothing that was working to be able to get her to go to sleep. So whatever was happening in her mind, it was racing. And of course, I have no idea what that was. She sought emergency treatment. We're still in November. Received trazodone and other medications. Patrick's mom helped connect her with a perinatal mental health specialist. Now, Patrick's mom was probably, I don't know if she's at the court every day, but she was actually there as a witness. I saw her testify on behalf of the defense. I don't recall if she also testified on behalf of the prosecution, but of course she was cross-examined. Ironically, it was her mom. If you were following along this trial or following it on social media, you may have seen where the world, myself, I was watching it live and my mouth dropped open. And apparently people who were in the courtroom say the whole courtroom gasped. The jury gasped, everybody did. When the prosecutor asked her mother-in-law, so Patrick's mom, by the way, ma'am, you're a Roman Catholic, right? Yes, I am. You are aware that murder is a mortal sin. So they brought the mother-in-law's religion into it. And it wasn't just the fact that the religion was brought in, it was the specific way that it was. And which, of course, was not appropriate in a courtroom. Anyways, Patrick's mom, we're back to November. Patrick's mom helped connect her with a perinatal mental health specialist. So the family by this time in November was involved. We had testimony from sisters, from the sister, from the mom, from the mother-in-law, that Lindsay was not being silent. Now, she wasn't telling everybody exactly how she felt, and the way she communicated with different people were different and at different times. But by November, the family was now, I wouldn't, again, court data. So what we learn from a court is kind of disjointed, because it's not like a bio. Eventually, maybe there will be a biography written, or some like an investigative journalist can put everything together and tell the whole story. But the way that information comes in a court is very much based on which lawyer wants to talk about that information. So, for example, the prosecution doesn't have an incentive to tell like a very human story of tragedy and whatever from beginning to end of this person, because that would humanize the person. In the same way that the defense doesn't have an interest in bringing the entire story out and making everything make sense in its own time, beyond trying to prove its method of their defense, which is, in this case, to say, yeah, she killed her children, but she's not criminally responsible because of her mental health. She wasn't able to make decisions. So that's why, as I'm telling the story now, I'm basing this almost entirely from trial data, which means that it's very it's it's not the way you would typically tell a nice story about someone, even a sad story or a bad story. Because even if you tell like a terrible story about like a villain, right? You can do it in a way that isn't quite this, metallic feeling. Okay. So Patrick's mom, her mother-in-law, in November, helped her hook up with a perinatal mental health specialist. She began seeing additional psychiatric providers, and a lot of times she was doing that on her own. She was going out. She was seeing people online, telemedicine, telepsych health, and stuff like that. She reported feeling disconnected, disoriented, forgetful, and concerned about medication dependence. So the kind of medications we're talking about here were these psychiatric drugs. And, remember, she's an RN. So I'm sure, just through her work and whatever else, like a lot of us, myself included, are afraid of psychiatric medications because they truly can be very bad. Later lawsuits allege hallucinations or other psychiatric symptoms emerged or worsened during this period being November. So remember, the first child was born, Cora was born in 2017. The last child was born, Callan was born in May of 2022. By November of 2022, there was a very serious spiral that was happening. December of 2022, family members described worsening hopelessness, intrusive thoughts, fear, and insomnia. Intrusive thoughts, you've probably heard that talked about a lot. Even on social media, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about intrusive. What are intrusive thoughts? The word intrusive can kind of help us. These are not welcome thoughts. This is not something that you are sitting down and pondering yourself. So you're not intentionally trying to contemplate about whatever it is. It's intruding into your mind. It's intruding into your conscious mind. It's not a bad dream. You're awake when you're having intrusive thoughts. They can be terrifying. They can be voices. Sometimes intrusive thoughts can, and I don't even mean hallucinations, but it can be someone in the back of your head, or even a fictional character or a real person in your head, speaking to you. You're not good enough. Why are you still here? God doesn't love you. This person, the trial itself didn't focus an awful lot on religion, except on some of the pastoral care that she was receiving. But intrusive thoughts, I have to tell you, in my encounter, especially like on the streets, as a street priest out among the people, dealing with the homeless and the addicted and people like that. It wasn't until watching all this trial that I really started to think about, intrusive thoughts. That actually is a really good descriptor, because as you talk to the mentally ill out on the streets, or even the severely addicted, which I'm sure is its own kind of mental illness, intrusive thoughts are a great way that they can't get off the streets because they have these thoughts. Lindsay disclosed different concerns to different people. This is December of 2022. Okay, and by the way, if you're just joining us, my name is Father Chris. We're going through kind of a timeline right now, because so much of the online conversation doesn't really include this. It's much more emotional or engagement driven. And so oftentimes you probably have pieces of this timeline that you've seen or heard, or might have turned the trial on or seen a meme, or not a meme, but a reel, whatever they are, TikTok and stuff like that. So I wanted to go through this. And when this live stream concludes on X and on YouTube, this will become a video where you can go back and watch it. And so the reason we're doing this is because, primarily for me, it's the morals of you, the people encountering this story. And of course, I do care for Lindsay. I do. She to me is a person on the margins. She's a mentally ill person who did a terrible thing, but I also believe was failed. And in this world today, that's well, we'll get to that later. So, uh, Lindsay disclosed different concerns to different people. This is December of 2022. Callan, the last baby, was born in May of 2022. So that's our separation of time right now. She was an RN, but after the delivery of her last child, she was in maternity leave, was spiraling down, and never returned to work. So this was the end of her career. Lawsuits allege, and okay, this is a good thing to say. So I've said that a couple times. Some of this data is not only coming from the criminal trial, but it's coming from lawsuits, and that's because there are several lawsuits going on at the same time, or even prior to the criminal trial, for negligence against clinical systems or specific psychiatrists or therapists, and so that data is also being shared inside the criminal trial sometimes, but it's also available to us because if it's public record. So lawsuits allege she contacted a suicide hotline and sought crisis services. So during 2022, December of 2022, if you've heard about that part of her story, that's this time period in December. At some appointments, so these would be with psychiatric care, some in person, some of this was the telepsych health. At some appointments, she denied having an immediate plan to harm herself or her children. Okay, so what that means is, I don't know, if for those of us who encountered, whether we're clergy or medical people or people, guidance counselors at school, etc. If someone comes in and they're experiencing some kind of an emotional crisis, a mental crisis, or battered women coming in from being hurt at home, one of the questions that is asked, and it can be asked in different ways, but what you're getting at is, are you safe right now? Right now, are you safe? Oh yeah, I'm safe. Okay. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Yeah, sometimes. How would you do that? That's the plan part. And since she's a mom with young kids, a similar question would be asked in a way to try to get out of her, so, how are you doing with the kids? You thinking about hurting them? Oh, you are? Okay, so maybe you are. How would you go about hurting whoever you're asking about, in this case, the children? So at some appointments, she denied. She was asked, and this is on the record, which means that the clinician or the whoever it was she was talking to, took a note somehow and made a record of asking that question. And that's one of the problems here, is that this data, and this is part of our American system of health. I think in the UK with the NIH, is that what it is? NH, whatever it is in the UK. I think your system is a little bit more interconnected, might not be as concerned with privacy as what the American system is. Here, this fractured health system of all these different encounters and these professionals, when she was reaching out, they weren't talking to each other oftentimes. They weren't getting the medical records. And again, in the US, we have a very strong privacy emphasis, which can be good. But I think this is also an example of where the emphasis might have been a little bit too much on privacy. And so we ended up not getting all this information. By we, I mean the system. So we're still in December of 2022. She sought emergency and specialized psychiatric care. So she felt so out of control, and again, these are my descriptions. This is just me talking about in very general terms. So please, the way I'm giving you some data, but if you hear what I just said, that's all me. So she sought emergency and specialized psychiatric care. So something had gotten to such a precipice that she felt, I need emergency help. And that's, I think, something very important. And we're going to get to all of this when I'm finished going through the timeline. The actual reason we're here isn't for me to re-present the court case to you. It isn't for me to tell you all about this person named Lindsay. My goal in this is the moral implications of us encountering. Are we doing good? Something weird just happened on the computer. I'm going to open up one of the apps and I'm going to listen to myself and make sure that I still sound okay. Because it would really be bad if I was here the whole time. And never knew you couldn't hear me if I was here the whole time. All right, so by the way, I had asked earlier from someone from X if you wouldn't mind. All right, so okay. All right, let me get rid of myself here. Excuse me. All right, so if someone from X could tell me in the chat that you're hearing me, because I don't think the X chat, like I'm seeing YouTubers and people from, well, just YouTube actually. So let's just see what we got here. Let me see if anyone is. See, I don't know if anybody's commented at all. Let me go to the actual live video. We're doing this on X. I don't know if anybody's commented. Oh, there you are. Okay, Father is here. Father Chanel is here. Tech Bro, the X comments are not coming through, but I can see Tech Bro just said it sounds fine. So what I'll do is I will keep this open. So people from X, if you comment, I will try to catch it. But this is also where I have my data. So let me see how I could do that. I do have my... No, that's going to get too confusing. So what I'll do is, I've got my own issues, trust me, attention deficit disorder since I was a kid. We'll talk about that sometime. Like I grew up in the 1980s when a lot of these drugs you're hearing about, not some of the more modern ones, but I don't have to think Zoloft, but anyway, some of those early SSRIs I was a guinea pig when I was a kid in the 1980s. And let me tell you, I never got over it. Never. Okay. So at least, just so you know, I cannot see X people on the main chat here through this platform. So I will come back here, but thank you, Tech Bro, and thank you, Father. Okay, so let's continue on with the timeline. She sought emergency and specialized psychiatric care. Really important. We're now really rocketing. The story is rocketing towards its very unfortunate conclusion where it's going to get to. And so multiple professionals were involved, but unfortunately, like I said, it was not interconnected very well. So she wasn't sharing the same experiences with everyone. And by the way, that's really how that is. And by the way, none of what I'm doing tonight is in defense of her or her case or anything like that. But I can bring a perspective as a missionary, as a street priest, as someone who has encountered people in crisis quite a lot. I can tell you that they absolutely do communicate differently to different people. A woman like this would talk to her sister in a way that she would never, or quite often wouldn't, with her husband. You know, same thing, she would talk to a priest or a clergy person in a different way than she would to her mother-in-law and to a doctor. And so she wasn't, all of these clinicians were not aware of everything that was happening. Questions remain about whether any provider understood the whole picture. And, they didn't. If they did, she would have been committed without her consent, which is what would have, we did something in the USA, again, back in the 80s and 90s for financial reasons and for supposed freedom reasons and moral reasons, where the ability to commit someone who is in really serious mental crisis was made. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's very difficult for the state or the doctors to do it. Okay. Let's move into January of 2023. So remember, the last child, Callan, I hope I'm saying his name right. I'm sorry. God rest you. He was born May of 2022. By September, we were having major problems. By November, it got worse. By December, she's going for emergency psychiatry. She's literally running around trying to find help. January of 2023, voluntarily admitted herself to McLean Hospital on January 1. So that is a psychiatric hospital that is affiliated with Harvard. Now, I have not done the research to go through and find out what the affiliation is specifically. You know, like in Minnesota, we have the University of Minnesota, which is huge. It has a great medical school. And then there are affiliated hospitals. Usually you'll see like the U of M with the colors of the school and everything. It'd be like the University of Minnesota Health System or hospital or something like that. And basically the medical students from the University of Minnesota would go over to that health system. And, you know, if they are this kind of a doctor, they might be, if they're an obstetrician, they might be on like the delivery floor of the hospital, whatever. So I don't know exactly. Unfortunately, I haven't done the research to know what the specific connection is between Harvard and this. She was discharged approximately 4 days later. Now, this is where it gets where the trial data is incomplete, because we don't have a full. We just have how the case was presented. You know, did she demand to leave? Was she discharged because the hospital felt okay, you're good to go? This is hate. You know, the lawyers will try to present this stuff as if it's absolute fact, but we don't have. I'm not comfortable, having watched this thing in its entirety, to be able to say that I would be comfortable saying how these discharges happened. Diagnosed there with severe depressive disorder without psychotic features. So the record states, does not state that there was a concern of psychosis or a psychotic. So you might colloquially, you might hear like a psychopath, right? Like think of a serial killer or something who's, you know, a psychopath. And oftentimes we, in our speech out in the world, don't use those words right. So here, psychosis or psychotic. And by the way, I'm not a doctor. I told you before at the beginning of this thing, I'm not a lawyer. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I am comfortable talking about this in a way that is not giving any medical advice, etc. But here, she was diagnosed with severe depressive disorder without psychotic features. The psychosis is when the disorder reaches such a point that you can start doing things that you wouldn't typically do, or you know that. So you're now capable of doing things where the disease itself is pushing you along to a point where your actions are no longer necessarily your own. And again, there's a fine line, and I don't know where that fine line is. And that's another thing. Listening to this, the defense and the prosecution medical specialists from the psychiatric community, I'm not comfortable with that. They're even comfortable with where these lines are. And again, that's because we're dealing with the mind, and the mind is so unique, and it's not something you can look at like a bacterial infection and just put it in a petri dish and figure out what you're dealing with. How much is it? Is it resistant to this or that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She continued outpatient psychiatric treatment, and some of that, remember, was virtual. So so some of that was just, you know, literally just was telemedicine, right? On January 23, her psychiatrist testified that Lindsay denied suicidal or homicidal thoughts. Now, That's important because that goes back to something we talked about earlier. And by the way, if you're just joining us, we're going through this timeline just to, before we get into my purpose for doing this, which is our moral, how this affects us as we encounter this morally. Because what I see when it comes to any of these big stories, but something like this particularly, my primary concern is with your souls. And I don't want to say that I don't have a concern for her, okay, because I do, and I pray for her, and I really hope whatever happens through this thing that she's going to make it right with God, which she may. By the way, people are making that. Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. People are presuming as if these events just happened. These events, as we're about to see, because it's 2026 right now, the events that happened were 3 years ago, and everything that we can know, that I know after, is that she does have pastoral care. So this idea that she's not showing any remorse, she's not showing any repentance, that may already have happened. So we can't presume that that hasn't happened. That doesn't mean we shouldn't pray for her. But my primary concern for doing all of this isn't with that. She is an inpatient in a hospital with surrounded by family, and they see her often. And there's priests and chaplains and clergy that are around her. So my concern is with you and with how the community, the online community that I've encountered, has encountered this story. And I'm concerned about it because we can damn ourselves. Which, can you imagine, over something like this, as tragic as it is, becoming such a bitter human being that we'd end up damning ourselves over this? And by the way, if you do, and the vast majority of you here are on X, so if you go into some of my replies, you'll see people are not happy with me. I mean, there are a lot of people who are. I mean, I don't even know what the dividing line is. Maybe that Grok could tell me if I ever wanted to talk to it and ask it, like, can you tell me, because I'm getting a lot of support. My one big post about this is going pretty big, and it's bringing in people from, obviously they don't typically interact with me. They're not following my religious stuff. And ironically, the religious people oftentimes are very angry with me. In fact, tonight there was someone, you can go and see it in the replies. It's not private. So it's not messages. It's right out there. Was very, very upset with me when this person asked me, Father Chris, why are you so, what's the word? Obsessed. Why are you obsessed with her, with Lindsay, as if I'm obsessed with her? And I pointed out, and you can see this in my replies, it's pretty recent, actually. So if you wanted to see it, I understand why someone looking at me talking about this in the way I am, very publicly, would think that my primary concern is with Lindsay Clancy. It's not. It is. You see what I mean? It's both and. But I the chance that I'll ever meet her or talk to her, so I'm not going to be directly in her path of spiritual help, direction, care, beyond my prayers. Okay. But my ability to encounter you, so that's why I'm here. And basically, what did I say? I basically said in this reply that I'm concerned with your soul, and by your, I'm not pointing a finger at you. I am, but it's the online community who I'm encountering in their thousands and millions and whatever, because I'm concerned of how people are behaving. So anyways, we'll continue on. So on January 23rd, her psychiatrist testified that Lindsay denied suicidal or homicidal thoughts. I didn't write when I put this thing together, I didn't put the note of who that was. So I'm sorry. I don't remember the psychiatrist who it was, but remember, there were so many. On January 24th, 2022, Lindsay took Cora to a pediatric appointment. Now, if I go back, I believe Cora was born December 24th, 2017. So Cora is the oldest child. So on January 24, 2023, Lindsay brought Cora to a doctor's appointment. Later, Patrick, Lindsay's husband, left home to pick up food and medication. All right. So this is the day. Okay. This is the day on January 24th, 2023, where Patrick went out to get takeout, like a takeout meal to bring home. He was also going to stop by a pharmacy and pick up some medication. I think it was for Cora. While Patrick was gone, Lindsay killed the 3 children. Now, I'm going to briefly describe how she did that. So if you are uncomfortable with that, mute me right now. You can just mute your volume, okay? So Patrick left to go and get dinner, take out, and get a pharmacy order to bring back home. So if you go to the gym, or if you have home exercise stuff, there are those kind of elastic things you can use there. And Lindsay was into fitness. And what she did was she wrapped around the throats of the children. And there was a dispute in the trial about whether she tied it off. But I'm confident from what I've heard that she, I don't want to use my hands. But there is people are thinking, when you think because the children were strangled, there is a narrative, perhaps, that she took the children, and was, the way you would see in a movie, and that's not what happened. She wrapped these elastic things around the throats, around the neck, tied it off. Child was down. Brought another child in and just did the same thing until they were dead. So this is January 24th, 2023. So remember, the last baby was born in May of 2022. So you went from May until January of the next year. And that's when this happened. Cora was 5. Dawson was 3. Colin was 8 months old. Lindsay harmed herself. So, remember, her intention was, by intention, I mean the intention that we can see. So, I'm not in her head or in her heart, right? I'm just going to say intention, but you understand, I qualified that, okay? Her intention was not to kill the kids and then just go on with life as, now life's going to be better. I don't have kids anymore. There's nothing to show that was ever the intention. Because she immediately went upstairs and cut herself deeply, and ended up falling, jumping, however you want to think, out of the upper story window. Now, this is January in Massachusetts, so it's winter time. She survived, but was paralyzed. Now, again, the defense, this is where we don't have good, this part of the story is unclear. And now to the court, it might be very clear, because the jury is going to believe one of these things and they're going to whatever. Out here, again, like I said earlier, court information is not always good for like a narrative story because there's so many gaps. But she cut herself, and then one way or another, she went out the upper story window and fell to the ground in wintertime. So if you're not from the north, during January, now Massachusetts, it's not Minnesota or Wisconsin, so it's not going to be frozen solid the way it would be in there. And I don't remember I should have looked that up to see what the winter would have been like in that time period. But the ground would be frozen. So it was a hard fall. And she broke her back and is paralyzed from about the belly button down. Patrick returned home, discovered what had happened. He called 911, and by that time, all the children were dead. There was no way to resuscitate them. The trial. Okay, so let's just take a little break here for this, okay? So if you're just joining us, because I can see by the numbers that people are coming in, my name is Father Christopher Vorderbruggen. I'm grateful that you're here. It's not particularly a religious space, not a prayer and devotional thing tonight. We're encountering Lindsay Clancy, kind of her life story. That's what we're in, right? We're concluding where she had been free up to this point. I'm doing this tonight particularly because we're driving towards a conversation that I'm trying to have about the morality and the moral implications of us encountering this story and talking about it the way it is happening online, which concerns me. And so we're in a very uncomfortable point. By the way, when this is over on X and on YouTube, and by the way, I'm going to go back to X just to see if there's any more comments. On X and on YouTube, this will become a video. So you can go back to the beginning and kind of get everything. I'm trying to do it as dispassionately as I can so that, but obviously you probably saw just a moment ago, I wasn't, left her at her request. So, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So, anyways, let's continue on. All right. The trial. Now there's a gap here, and a lot of this gap is not filled very well by anything. Eventually we'll have a much better story. That's January 2023. The trial begins it's at the end of July of this year, because just today the defense rested. So we're at that point in the trial. The defense does not dispute that Lindsay killed her children. So when you're accused of a crime in most countries, in the United States, you've probably seen it on TV. The judge is going to ask you, are you guilty or not guilty? You can just flat out say not guilty, with the implication being I'm going to fight it to say that I didn't do this. You can say I'm guilty and work a deal with whoever. This is a little different. The question is her psychiatric condition and criminal responsibility. So, Lindsay Clancy admits to what I just described, and the defense itself is not disputing it. What they're saying is that she experienced severe psychiatric illness, including psychosis. And again, that's where these lines are, which are not clear, and that's why this is so complicated an issue to determine, to be able to say with any kind of certainty. In reality, there is no certainty. That's not a medical opinion. That's just me telling you. Like, there's no way we can ever know. It's not like a bacterial infection that you can measure. The psychiatrists are basically just observers who are very well trained in a specialized field. But they're just observing stuff and putting together an opinion based on their observations. And so, not on, like I said, if you're talking about like a physical bacterial infection where you can actually count the bacteria, you can classify the bacteria, you can see what hurts them and what makes them grow faster, So, defense experts maintain that she experienced severe psychiatric illness, including psychosis. And that's what they have to prove. They have to convince the jury that she wasn't just depressed, clinically even. She wasn't just very severely mentally ill. It wasn't that. She was actually in a state of psychosis. Prosecution expert Dr. Mack acknowledges major depression, but disputes that she experienced psychosis. So That's the prosecution has to convince the jury, no, we're not denying that she was mentally sick and hurting and really messed up, but she was never at a place where she wasn't in complete control of every single decision she made. The prosecution, the defense has rested, has now brought in rebuttal witnesses. The attorney, Kevin Reddington, aggressively challenges the prosecution's experts. Closing arguments are expected next week. So by Monday, if there's no more technical, because this trial has been kind of plagued with, by the way, if any of us have ever used Zoom, yeah, it can be kind of clunky at times, or whatever your equivalent at your job or school is, or whatever you're doing to Zoom. There's different ones. But this trial has brought out that the government doesn't do things very well. I mean, they made a fiasco every single time they had to use a piece of technology in that courtroom. I mean, it was a massive ordeal, and it took hours and hours and hours to set up. And then usually the first go, they didn't get it, and they would have to dismiss the jury to go and do something back in the other room while the tech guys came in, whoever they are. Be kind of interesting to find out who are these tech guys, because they're, they're not coming in from IBM or Apple. So what are some of the moral questions? Okay, which is really what I'm been writing on. If you've been following my writing on this, you'll notice that's what it focuses on. Now, people don't always recognize that, because a lot of people are coming into this really fired up, and they already have a side. They have I'm a pro Lindsay side, I'm against her side, I'm neutral, or I'm somewhere in the middle where I'm just supporting maternal depression and psychosis research and funding or something like that. But a lot of people are coming in at this really hot and heavy, and they're angry already, and then they encounter my work, which is trying to reach you at a different level, and it really just like pushes them over the edge. You could see it. You could really go and see. Just look at some of my posts and the replies to it, right? But if you quietly read my stuff, you'll see it's not really taking a position on her at all. It's about you. It's about you and how you interact with the story. So, moral questions. 3 children are dead. Their deaths must never be minimalized. So no matter what side you're on here, which I really wish people wouldn't have these sides. But anyways, the victims, the primary victims, are the children. Lindsay killed them. That reality is not in dispute. Lindsay was also experiencing serious mental health struggles. That's another part of our, if people choose, and that's another thing. We've gone from a point like when I was growing up in the 1980s and 90s, where this would have been a news story. It would have been maybe on the nightly news, or if you lived in Massachusetts or in the Boston greater metro area or whatever, this would have been, you would hear about this more often. But someone like me growing up in Minneapolis and Minnesota, it would just be a periodic news story. And that's kind of where it would end. There wouldn't be a larger community level conversation generally about something like this, unless it was moms at their whatever mom gatherings are, whatever, they might bring it up. Did you hear about this story? But people wouldn't be so invested in it. And that's what's changed in our time. That's what this has done. Okay, this has allowed us to be part of this. No matter where we are, no matter what time of day it is, no matter who we are, we can now be a part of this. And we can now have opinions that we don't just have in our own head, which are kind of boring. We now share it with other people. And you'll find out very quickly someone else will have a different opinion, or will phrase their opinion differently. And all of a sudden now you have people coming together like this. And this is the downside of social media. Because if there's anything we've demonstrated as a culture, is that we don't handle this very well. And that's a large part of why I'm on X, because I want you to go to heaven. I don't want you to damn your soul because you're sitting there as an angry, bitter, judgmental person thinking you're a great Christian. Get it? Now that can be hard to hear. And I'm not looking at you. I know I'm looking at you, and I am looking at you. If it feels like that, let it sink in a little bit. But I'm not looking at you, like personally. I'm not judging you right now in real time. Okay? But that's why I'm doing any of my work on X primarily. It's because I want people to go to heaven. I want people to know God. And I don't want people to push God out of their life as they're inviting this kind of bitterness in. Because that's what happens. You push him right out. You know, the Holy Spirit will leave. Why are there a lot of streamers like you talking about Jesus? I guess I don't know your question. Don't understand your question. You want to say it again? Okay. The experts disagree about her specific condition and criminal responsibility. Recognizing her suffering does not excuse what happened. That's so important. We're bringing it back to the Christianity side. We're bringing it back to the Beatitudes. Okay? Blessed are the, fill it in. If you don't know the Beatitudes, they're on my profile right now. Just scroll a little bit. In the last day or two, they've been posted more than once. You know? We're right back to that core message. Caring about her does not mean caring less about her children. I said the children were the primary victim. Her ex-husband, her family, and herself are also victims. I don't even want to say secondary victims. This whole situation has got nothing but victims in it. You know? Now, at the same time, like I said before, it is undisputed, including by herself and her defense team, that she did kill the children. So she's a perpetrator and a victim. Okay? And I mean that in both the legal way, I certainly can't comment very much on that, but also in a moral way, you know. And that's important to say. And caring about her does not mean caring less about her kids. That is something, and I'm breaking this up, okay? That is one of the biggest problems with religious influencers, particularly online. Catholic ones are some of the worst. The biggest Roman Catholic influencer accounts. So I'm talking about like just lay faithful out there who have a really good voice, they're articulate, they got connection somehow and they blew up and now they got followers in the millions. I'm not going to name them for you. Okay, whether their focus is primarily religion, which some of them are, and some of them are like religious influencers, but they're more like commentators on everything, you know. They frame things in black and white. You're on this side or you're on that side. It's heaven, it's hell, it's right or wrong, it's my way or the highway. There is never any in between. There is never, and that is a very human way of thinking, because you get this impression like, if I believe like that, now I can establish balance. There's good, there's bad, there's right and the wrong, there's the bad people and the good people. And of course, the good people are on my side, the religious influencer, and the bad people are on the other guy's side. And you have this idea then that you now have a form of balance. It's all a fantasy. That's not at all how any of it works. No matter who you are, let's say you are an Anglican, an Orthodox Christian, a Roman Catholic, an Old Catholic, whatever you are, if you're a sacramental Christian, you have done an examination of conscience at some point in your life. And if your tradition brings you to like a verbal confession where you go before a priest, forgive me, Father, I have sinned, you know, you learn real quick that the black and the white and the heaven and the hell and you should be damned and you should have been executed or whatever it is, goes right out the window when we examine our own conscience. Because all of us, I guarantee you, we all commit mortal sins. And so I'm sure there are a few exceptions, you know, but it's okay to say we all commit mortal sin, meaning the kind of sins that are so serious that they separate us from our Creator by our doing that. And so these religious influencers and other influencers, there's big political influencers that do the same thing too. it's one party or not. That's not real. And so if you support Lindsay in the sense that you see what happened to her as a failure of the maternal mental health system, if you decide to speak out like that, this other side will say, how dare you? How dare you do that to the memory of these kids who I just went through how they were killed? How could you possibly do that? And that's where, and this is tough because this hurts to hear, a spiritually mature person, if we're thinking of this in a religious sense, and some of you might not be religious at all, and that's fine, so forgive me for going there right now, but the spiritually mature religious person knows that that way of thinking doesn't work. That doesn't mean that there isn't right or wrong. That doesn't mean that there's not sin in something that's not sin. But it does mean that more than one thing can be right at the same time. Or if you start really studying theology, and I mean beyond the internet, if you get with like a theologian who becomes like a director for you or someone, or if you go to school or whatever you do for it, language you might hear either exactly as I'm about to say it, or the implication is that there are tensions. There are tensions. So, for example, a great example of a tension in the New Testament thought, not just in the writing, but like in the theology that comes out of it, would be like something Paul would say, no man who lies with man. So no gay person can enter the kingdom of God. And yet at the same time, you can see where God's mercy is applied in a way where there might not have been a test. That doesn't mean that a certain activity isn't sinful, but it also means that there's a tension there, or baptism is required for salvation, and yet the thief on the cross doesn't require baptism. He wasn't baptized. People have tried to figure out, like, how was he bitten? No, he wasn't baptized. God can save who he will save. And in this sense, God the Son was right next to him and said, you're saved, and had every right to do that. And yet, as a Christian priest, my responsibility is, if someone is not baptized, to try to help them get on the road to baptism. Right? There's a tension there. I'm giving you really basic theological examples of tension. But so there's another extreme. The other extreme of this are the people who are, this is not unique to Lindsay Clancy. This happens with all the high profile murder trials. It's usually not being directed. In fact, it's almost never being directed by the defendant themselves, but there's like a fan movement that starts around them. And that started here. And it's in several different forms. You have some of the, like Planned Parenthood, for whatever reason, has picked up on this and is creating things. They same Lindsay, whatever like that. Now, interestingly enough, I'm not speaking for Planned Parenthood, but a lot of the women that you're seeing in videos dressed in pink and showing solidarity, these religious influencers with the millions and millions of views and followers are pointing out how crazy that is, but almost not really quoting what the women are actually saying at these rallies, these gatherings they're having. And so we're left with this impression that these are like cult followers of Lindsay Clancy that have lost their minds. And you'll see, I hate to say it because I hate the political spectrum, but like right-wing religious figures and political commentators right now saying, like, if you come home and you see your wife wearing a pink shirt or talking about Lindsay Clancy, divorce her right away and get custody of your kids. or if they do play what these women are actually saying, and you actually listen to what they're saying. I saw one the other night, must have been last night maybe, where one of the really big influencers was posting a video that was seconds of a minute's long interview, where there was a woman. I wouldn't even know if she's middle-aged, but she's, looks like a mom, but not a young mom. And she said, this could have been me. This could have been my sisters who this happened to. And people jumped on that and mocked her for saying that. And said, again, these particular types of influencers were saying, you might even have shared this, which is, if you did, I feel so bad. Please say you're sorry. If you did, in your heart, and to God, say you're sorry. Because you misrepresented this woman. What she was saying was, I could have given birth and ended up with psychosis and not been treated for it. That's what she's saying. She's not creating joy over, I could have killed somebody. That's what she was saying, but it wasn't in a sense like that. It was in a sense like, I could have got this disease and not been treated for it. And so if you actually listen, and again, and I know someone out there is going to say, Father Chris is supporting these women in pink. And that's not my intention. I care about them. My intention is your soul. I'm worried about your soul, how you could end up unwittingly misrepresenting and committing calumny, which is a mortal sin. If you say something about the woman I just described, okay, that even though in your moral universe somehow seems like it's right, but you're actually telling a falsehood about her and you're promoting it online. That's not just a lie. That's calumny. If you've been with me in my very exhaustive examination of consciences, you'll know that those are some of the gravest sins. Calumny, detraction, gossip. They're under the same commandments as what? Murder. Can you believe it? Laugh at me. It's not a joke. Calumny, detraction, gossip. When we do our examination of conscience, did you kill somebody? Did you commit column? Can you believe it? So all of these people who are out there are putting their souls on the line, being angry, joining in this conversation about a murderer and the sin they possibly are committing is in the same category. Can you believe that? That's why I'm doing this. Because I want you to go to heaven. So that's where we get to a point where we have to make a decision. Can I safely participate in this conversation? Can I participate in this conversation about Lindsay or about any of it or anything online without putting my own soul on the line and dragging other people with me? Because that's what happens. I write frequently that the most spiritually dangerous people online, perhaps in the world, are not the Muslims or the whoever you're afraid of. Because remember, we live in a culture where you have to be afraid of. It's the religious influencers that you follow. And I guarantee you follow them. I guarantee it. And you could end up, and you've seen my posts. Everyone in here is from X pretty much. Now, obviously, just like Lindsay, when it comes to calumny, which is in the same category as murder, gossip is in the same category as murder. When it comes to your culpability for that, now that's where the spectrum is. That's the same thing that's true with Lindsay. What did she know? Was she in her right? Actually, the same questions that a priest in the confessional would go through with you if he had questions about it or thought you weren't aware of it yourself. When determining if you committed the most mortal of mortal sins is, what did you know? Did you know it was a sin? Okay. Were you free to make the choice? That's what we're talking about with Lindsay. Was she suffering from psychosis? What did she, you see what I'm saying? She probably knew killing kids is wrong. I don't even think I don't even think anyone is disputing that, you know. But at that, and by the way, there's a non-magical, but it might seem magical reason why morally and legally things kind of mesh together and they kind of make sense. Like if a theologian or a priest watching this trial would, if they're thinking about it, would recognize, wait a minute, that's exactly how I am evaluating someone in the confessional to figure out where their soul is at right now. Did they know it was wrong? Were they free to make the decision? And did they choose and do it anyways? Western law is based on what? It's based on the church. Absolutely. Absolutely. It is. If you go back to English common law, which was preceded by the canon law and preceded by Christian moral teaching. And of course, American law is based on that and everything else. So it's not, the questions they're asking in court, they're using legal language, but it's the same questions that all of us have to ask ourselves when we do an examination of conscience. And that makes this, again, so important for you to be wary about how you participate. Okay, so there. Is that enough? Let's see if there's any comments on XE. I have to open this app here to see if there was, because I can't see it. So I'm not seeing anything new. So apparently we're in business. So this is not a fan club. Don't make it a fan. Don't make either side of this a fan club. The other side can be just as much of a fan club. There can be the anti this and she's a this and deserves to burn in hell and she's that. If you join that fan club, you're risking it as much as if you were in like a her fan club. It's not entertainment. A family is destroyed, right? Kids are dead. A mom is paralyzed and is a murderer, even if she's not culpable legally or spiritually. She did this, you know. She'll never forget it. And by the way, religious influencers and activists. Why are people who speak constantly about human dignity so comfortable mocking a suffering mother? If you look at my big pinned post right now, it's big for me. You'll see that I asked that question. And what prompted that post was, first of all, it was already in my heart. And I had seen the religious influencers, and then I saw the god dang pro-life leaders jump in. And if you look at that post, I didn't even call them pro-life leaders. I was so mad. I called them anti-abortion leaders, because to me, that's not pro-life. You can't be pro-life. That doesn't mean you're pro-Lindsay. But to come out the way these people have, and these pro-life websites, you know, have come out, boy, they use this. Look at that. Look at that. You know, comparing baby killers, putting them up online. Oh. Guys, that examination of conscience, man. If you're not Catholic even, or an Anglo-Catholic, if you want to feel bad about yourself, and I mean that in a good way, like in a way to kind of center yourself out of this crap, go onto my profile. And if you know how to search litany, Litany, space of humility. Oh yeah. When you pray the litany of humility, if you can still be a pro-life website, and I say that, I hate it. If you can be a pro-life website and put up images of baby killers and say, oh yeah, these are all the same. The governor of this, who did this abortion rule, this mom who killed her kid, this, that, and do it in a way that is so yucky. And yet we cheer it. I don't cheer it. And I hope you don't either. And I hope if you do cheer it, I hope you'll stop. I hope you'll stop. That doesn't help people go to heaven. I promise you. That is not, that is putting a sense of, that is putting halos over your head or the head of that website, people. Get it? That is, go and pray that litany of humility. Pray and read the Beatitudes. Put the Beatitudes in your heart. Someone who has the Beatitudes in their heart, none of us are going to do it perfectly, but someone who has the Beatitudes in their heart and prays the litany of humility even somewhat regularly won't talk like that. You'd be scared to talk like that. You would. And if you did talk like that, as soon as you realized you were doing that because you were part of a group or whatever, oh my God, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have thought that way about somebody else because I deserve to go to hell if it wasn't for what Jesus did. Oh yeah, you examine your conscience, you realize real quick, it's us. The bad guy is us. The Savior is our Lord in what he did. I am not any better than X or Y. I'm just perhaps at a different stage of my journey right now where maybe I'm not in mortal sin at this minute. Anyways, so the pro-life movement, guys. Look at the money you guys give them. Oh my gosh. Oh, you give them so much money. Oh. And look what they do with it. And I don't mean, I've said this before, I don't mean the on-the-ground crisis pregnancy centers. I don't mean that. Okay. Why do some anti-abortion activists show such little concern? We're still in the moral section here. By the way, okay, if you're just joining us, let me tell you what we're doing tonight. And we're not going to be here forever because actually when this live stream is gone, I'm going to be starting up a new live stream and it's going to be a lot better. Okay, it's going to be a lot better. We're going to use my new Kindle. And this was my birthday present to myself on May 13th. And we're going to be jumping into the Gospel of Luke. Oh, I love my Kindle. It is so nice to my eyes. Like I never knew how, because my eyes, I'm 49, just turned 49 in May. And reading has started to become difficult for me because my eyes hurt so often. And I don't know what it was, but it just makes it, I don't know how they do it. It's like, how do they make it so nice? But anyways, so we're going to come back tonight and we will read the Bible together. So I hope you'll join me for that. But, so if you're just joining us, we've been here for, where's the timer thing? An hour and 21 minutes. This is a conversation that I'm having with you, with myself, about Lindsay Clancy, her life, but it's focused more on the moral implications on how her story and our encounter with it can affect our own souls as Christians, or even if you're not Christian. And so what I started off doing was kind of dry, where I went through, basically, she was born all the way up until the events in January of 2023 when her children were killed. And now we're focused on, this is very much focused on me sharing my thoughts of watching what religious and other influencers in the online conversation have been and how serious I think it is in a bad way. And so when this live stream ends, we're on Twitch, Twitter, and X. We're on X, YouTube, and Twitch. On YouTube and on X, this will turn into a video that you can actually just watch. So you can go back to the beginning if you want. It's, anyways. So just wanted to say thank you for being here, and let's jump into this. So why are some anti-abortion activists, why do they show so little concern for maternal mental health? Okay. And again, that's me being pissed. Instead of calling them pro-life, I'm saying anti-abortion because I'm mad at them right now. But the pro-life movement does have something to prove, whether we like it or not. Because when we're out there advocating against abortion, which we are, which a huge, perhaps the majority, I don't know the numbers, see as us trying to take something away from them, trying to take a right away from them. That's how they see it. Now, some of them are very consciously aware of that, like that they're literally a pro-choice, pro-abortion, whatever you want to call it, activist, and they truly believe philosophically that one of our goals is not to defend innocent life, but it is to take away the rights of women, and it is to not see women. Now, you might say, I'm pro-life. I don't believe any of what Father Chris just said about that they are saying about us. So I'm not even going to address it. I'm not going to do anything about it. And I'm not saying you have to become an anti that philosophy, like verbal activist. But we do have to communicate in a way and behave in a way that proves that that is not right. So when you see what could be, you don't have to say it's for sure, what could be one of the most obvious visual examples, dead kids strangled, a mom paralyzed. When you see what could be one of the most in-your-face examples of the systematic failure of maternity mental health in the USA, a systematic, what could be. Now people are arguing with me about this online. I have no idea. I am not a doctor. But I can see, to me, just as an observer watching this woman run around all over the place between May and January. And some people are, she was just out to get drugs. You do not check yourself in to a psych ward because you want to get drugs. You don't do that. Yes, is there doctor shopping and everything else? Of course there is. But that's a whole nother thing I'm not even going to bring up tonight. But it sure as hell falls under that might not even be calumny. That could be detraction. So when we as pro-life people, and I realize with the number of people who are watching right now, there's probably, I would be willing to bet some of you are not anti-abortion or pro-life, which is, I'm glad you're here. But for those of us who are, we cannot make some of our loud, and that's the truth of it, the loudest religious influencers, the loudest anti-abortion voices on the internet, making us all look like dumbasses right now. You hear me? All of us. Because that side will only paint us as a caricature just the way we do of them. You know? And that's what they're experiencing. I knew it wasn't about life. It was never about life. It was about controlling women. They don't give a rat's butt about life in the womb or the mother or whatever. This was always about the patriarchy. It was always about the whatever. One of the greatest things you could do as a pro-life person, if you're capable, and that's not me saying, oh, if you're not capable, seriously, this is a skill that we don't all have. It's a visualization type skill. It's as if you could actually, and I don't mean, it's an old adage, but put yourself in there. But if you literally if you can, for one afternoon, step out of your own pro-life head, okay, which is a good place to be, and put yourself into the body, not literally, but you understand what I'm saying. Put yourself into the shoes of a pro-choice activist. Literally, go onto the internet and start reading things from her perspective. Look at the pro-life influencers. Look at the leaders. Look at the religious influencers. Look how they're talking about women right now. And ask yourself, if you were that person sitting in those shoes, looking over here, if you could really look me in the face and say, oh yeah, I totally believe that this is all about life for you. This was never about you trying to keep the woman down. That's us. We have to take responsibility for this. Okay? And if you've been part of this, you do not need to get on your knees and drag yourself, and scourge yourself and everything like that. You don't need to do any of that. You need to say you're sorry to God first, because it is a sin. I'm telling you. And you need to reform yourself. It's just not going to happen overnight. You can't disassociate yourself from these religious and other influencers overnight and start to be a good person. I don't mean to say it like that, but you know what I mean, right? It's going to take time. But anyways, sorry. Some of you are going to be pretty mad. I didn't write anything that serious. So even though I thought about it, I'm just going to come back and see if anyone's left any messages on X. No, not that I can see. Okay. So let's get back into this. So why do some anti-abortion activists show such little concern for mature? And this is, do you know what? This could have been an opportunity for I almost said a swear word. This could have been an opportunity for the pro-life groups to come together with the other side and say, yeah, I don't know what we're seeing, but we got to work on maternal mental health. We really do. And that's not what happened. But wouldn't that have been beautiful if it did? These are the people you're giving your money to. And let me tell you, those big groups, they've got a salary, baby. Oh, you think they don't? Yes, they do. You've given them your money. Yes. And this would have been the opportunity. You don't have to agree on everything. You didn't even, why abortion was even brought up into this, because that's another thing. All over the place, these pro-life websites are comparing this and that, when this could have been about, oh yeah, we care about the moms. And don't just do it for show, but really care about them. Or a mom will say, I've seen so many of this. Well, I had babies. I never had this kind of depression. I never felt like I wanted to hurt myself or them. She's making it up. How do you know that? How do I know that? I don't know anything. Okay. Why are people claiming certainty when medical experts disagree? Boy, that's a whole. I mean, that's just the time we live in now. Nobody's an expert on anything anymore, according to so many people. What effect does public cruelty have on other mothers who need help? Boy, that's a big one. Can you imagine the moms? Now, everything we know, and I'm a layperson when I'm talking right now, everything we know about something as serious as maternal psychosis. So that's the step up from, well, it's maybe more than one step, but it's more than just the postpartum psychosis. Everything we know about the postpartum psychosis is that it is very rare. Okay? But it's not so rare that it doesn't happen relatively often. You're talking about in the hundreds just in the USA every year. And there's probably more that is not reported. And it just doesn't end in a tragedy. Maybe it gets really close to a tragedy, but it doesn't quite get there, right? So this online cruelty, and that's what I think of it as, it's online cruelty. Imagine those women out there who see that, and someday when they're in a situation where they need to reach out for help, they're scared. Now with all the other mental stuff that's happening, they're already so mentally messed up. And you have helped place a tiny roadblock, which is enough, just enough, to make her not do what Lindsay apparently tried to do, which was run all over the place to try to get help. Tell her family, again, not completely, not in one sitting. Mom, I'm thinking about killing myself. Mom, I think it's better, since I don't want the kids to be alone, that I'm going to kill them too. And then the kids and me can be together for whatever her thinking was, right? What if there's a woman out there who's having those feelings, but she doesn't even tell fragmented parts of that to her close people, because you helped her create that last little barrier where she just won't do it. And I'm telling you, it's not worth it for you or for her, for anyone, but I'm talking about you. It's not worth it. Our cruelty with this or anything else can have consequences that we can't see all the time. It can be consequences way down the road. All right. Does our behavior encourage vulnerable women to speak, to seek treatment, or make them afraid? So we just covered that. Christian conviction does not give anyone permission to gossip, dehumanize, or delight in condemnation. I'm seeing a lot about that online right now, like thou shalt not kill will be quoted, or thou shalt this or that, or I'm, the best way for mercy. There's one of my mutuals tonight said, the best mercy for her is a quick death. No, it's not. The best mercy for her is treatment, or whatever it is she needs, whether that's in a prison or a hospital. And that's really what's going to happen, unless something really shocking happens. Like, I have to tell you, as a lay observer, but someone who does like true crime, so I have watched these cases before. As a lay observer, this case has been really bad, the trial. I mean, if you had to ask me, I would say that defense lawyer, Reddington, put on one heck of a case. He was everything you would want to impress a jury. He's charismatic. He is like a TV lawyer. I mean, like a little bit of Matlock, a little bit what do you see on Law and Order. He can be the Matlock, the really nice guy who's all walking all over the courtroom, or he can be the Law and Order guy, smashing his hand down and telling someone to be quiet and answer the question. And but he really communicated with the jury in a way that's remarkable. Whereas the prosecutors, and I don't know them. I don't even know their names. I feel like they have done a terrible job representing their state, their city or county, or however their offices are set up in Massachusetts, Commonwealth. So most likely what's going to happen is a guilty verdict, which will just be they find her guilty. If that's true, my understanding is then she's just like any other convicted person. There are sentencing guidelines, and my understanding is that in Massachusetts, for this kind of a crime, it's life without parole ×3 for the 3 kids. Another possibility, they say not guilty by reason of insanity is really tough to get. If you watch the online conversation, you'll see the experts, and by that I mean these influencers, and then all of you who repeat them. they would give you the impression that, oh yeah, people get off on this all the time. We've got an epidemic of, especially women getting off. It's really, but we have an epidemic of people getting off by reason of insanity. And that's what we say. In Massachusetts, the legal way of saying that is not guilty. No, not criminally responsible or criminally liable. So the implication is a kind of guilt, but just like the three things you have to be able to do to be culpable for committing a mortal sin, it's basically the same thing. If you can somehow prove that, anyways, so there are experts who are saying that that's likely, or more likely in this case than it might be, and that's probably because of some of the merits of the case, but also the lawyer, Reddington, has really done a stellar job, and they say he's the best of the best, and that's one of the reasons why. And of course, there could also be a not guilty if the jury was so, and again, this is just me thinking, if the jury was so turned or yucky towards the prosecution team for some of their stuff, like, are you Roman Catholic and do you know that the blah, 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 that was bad. But if the jury was so tainted by that it would go just not guilty, well, if that happens, then she's just off. It's done, And of course, there could also be a hung jury, which means they get to a point where they can't decide. And then the state, the Commonwealth, would have to decide if they'd want to prosecute her again. But what is a reality is another thing that you're seeing from the influencers. If she gets off by reason of insanity, I don't want a child killer to go free. That's not what's going to happen. She's going to be institutionalized on the psychiatric treatment side rather than on the state prison side. Now, the psychiatric treatment side may not last a lifetime. Difficult to say how long. Oh, she could be in there for 3 months. That's not going to happen. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. Could be 10 years, could be 20 years, 5 years. I don't know. What we know is that she is permanently paralyzed. That doesn't mean medical science won't make a breakthrough in the next couple of years, but the idea that she's going to go out and in any of these circumstances live a normal life, it's not going to happen. And she would most likely go into a treatment or remain where she is. She's in a hospital right now, full time. And my understanding is that when she's in the hospital, that she's never allowed to be alone, ever. And that doesn't mean her roommate. That means there's a staff person that's got eyes on her 24/7 because of how much of a risk she is. So, mental health system. Did anyone see the entire picture? No, they didn't. Did the different professionals communicate? No. Oftentimes it's because they just didn't know about themselves, and other times it was because the system is clunky. It just was too damn clunky. All right, that's our American system, and I don't know what the fix for that is. Were family concerns taken seriously? Were symptoms considered collectively rather than separately? Again, one symptom at a time may not have looked to be the emergency that it obviously was, but taken together, if you can put these fragments together, were crisis services responsible enough? That's just a question, something to think about. She did the whole thing that I post all the time. She went to the suicide hotline. She went to there was a place out of state, I think in Rhode Island, she went to that was, anyways, none of it worked. And again, we can't, because the system is fragmented by design, I personally can't think it's good to blame any specific people. And I realize there's civil lawsuits for money out there, but I personally hesitate to be upset or anything with anything. What should change to prevent another tragedy? All right. Roman Catholic Catechism 1735. Psychological conditions and fear can diminish personal responsibility. The next things we've pretty much already talked about, calumny and everything else. Scripture, just something to kind of sit in your heart for a little bit. And remember, if you're just joining us, this is not me joining the Lindsay Clancy fan club. This is me trying to be part of the salvation of souls of you. So John 7:24, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Moral judgment requires truth, context, and humility, which you will not get online from the religious influencers or the big-time commentators, because it's boring. It doesn't generate the kind of engagement that they need to maintain these things. And I'm not judging them personally. I'm just telling you that you won't get that. Moral judgment requires truth, context, and humility. You can't get that from influencers online. Okay? Because that doesn't work with the algorithms. Proverbs 18:13, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is a folly and shame unto him. Condemning someone without understanding the evidence is not wisdom, no matter what the influencers tell you. James 1:19, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Listen before reacting, and remember, you don't even have to react. You don't have to jump in. John 8:7, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. Resist the cruelty of a self-righteous crowd. That's something, it's groupthink too. Grandmas and people who wouldn't typically be part of these sorts of anger get everyone. You get me. We get caught up in a group and it feeds itself, right? Resist the cruelty of a self-righteous crowd. Even if you really think you guys are right, it's not worth it. James 2:13, for he shall have judgment without mercy. For he shall have judgment without mercy that hath shewed no mercy, and mercy rejoiceth against judgment. Christians should be deeply troubled by mercilessness. Luke 6:36, be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful. Mercy is Christian obligation. The Beatitudes. Yep. Christianity at a moment like this is what it's all about. That does not mean disorder or chaos. That does not mean that we shouldn't put people in prison. That doesn't mean that there should be no earthly justice. That's not what that means. It means the crowds with metaphorical pitchforks online being led around by the nose by influencers. That's what that means. That's how I'm using it. That's not what, anyways. Galatians 6:2, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Families experiencing mental health crisis need support. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. Apply this to influencers, comment sections, and public gossip. Let me read it again. Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers and the bearers. So, Um, that means exactly what it sounds like. And notice what it didn't say. So, even if you think something is right, you don't have to say it. James 3, verses 9 through 10. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to so be. Bless God. You're so pious. You're so holy. You take the Eucharist on your tongue. You never touch it with your hands, or you do this, or you do that, or you put this on your head, or don't put that on your head, or you pray this prayer, or you smell this incense. You know, you're praying to God all the time. And then you come online and behave like these religious influencers. No, not even close. Everything you just did before that, complete waste of time. Maybe not complete, mostly a waste of time. If you can't behave in a way. You get it? Galatians, no, that was already. If no, nope. I must have hit this thing because it came down. Romans 12:15. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Respond to this tragedy with grief, not entertainment. Yeah. Ezekiel 34:4. The diseased have ye not strengthened, neither have ye healed that which was sick, neither have ye bound up that which was broken, neither have ye brought again that which was driven away, neither have ye sought that which was lost, but with force and with cruelty have ye ruled them. A rebuke to those who respond to sickness and vulnerability with cruelty. Even if you don't understand, even if you don't really believe. So you might think that maternal depression, I keep saying that, postpartum depression isn't a real thing. You never felt it. Your mom never told you she felt it, or your wife never said whatever. So for you, you don't believe it. Just don't respond with cruelty, and you're on the right road at least. Micah 6:8. He hath shewed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Justice, mercy, and humility belong together. They all belong together. That's how that system works. So, we're going to wrap it up. Why am I addressing any of this? I'm speaking as a priest, not a lawyer or a psychiatrist. I've been ministering to people on the margins since 2008. What does that even mean? That means it fluctuates, right? So, people on the margins are people who society or the church or the online community, whatever, that's where it can change, because the groups that are being, or the people who are being targeted in the sense like this is right now, they change. And so, yeah, I see someone like Lindsay Clancy as someone who's on the margins right now. Doesn't matter how much money she has or doesn't have, how much publicity she has, or even if she has some supporters. If Christians are doing whatever they're doing to, or directing it towards her, that's something that I'm going to speak up and against. I have concern for vulnerable mothers and families, concern for the dignity of children, concern about the cruelty surrounding this case and others, concern about religious people confusing condemnation with holiness. That is not holiness. That doesn't mean that condemnation is antithetical to holiness. That's not what I'm saying. But the act of condemnation is not in itself like the definition of your personal holiness. So be careful with what you're participating in. The children who died deserve protection, and the children who are still alive deserve protection. And all of collectively the maternal health care debate conversation, if it leads to saving children, then it's like an airplane when it crashes. It's a terrible tragedy, right? But something that, especially with a major crash, like an airliner, when an airliner goes down, right? Almost always something good comes out of it. A safety thing that we never knew about is now identified, unfortunately, because of this terrible tragedy. But how many countless other lives will be saved because of it? So the same thing can be true here. If it doesn't look good right now, it does not look good because people have chosen their camps. The pro-life movement is not on the side in any kind of numbers right now, at least by the public ones, public voices, of jumping in on the maternal mental health care reform that is necessary. But we can pray and we can work for that to change. Their mother deserved effective mental health care. Other struggling mothers deserve better. We have to do better. We can do better. So, may God's peace be with each and every one of you. This was tough tonight. It might have been weird because it was maybe something that you're not normally hearing me talk about. But I'm glad that we had this opportunity to be together. Like I said, I'm going to close without a hymn because this is not a religious event that we did tonight. Know that you are in my thoughts and my prayers. The mothers out there, if any of you are watching, if you are struggling, I want you to know that God does love you, that I care about you. Talk to someone you really trust if you're struggling, moms. If you just feel you can't express your feelings because it doesn't make sense, if you have weird feelings or thoughts or voices, whatever it happens to be, it doesn't even have to be a doctor. You can go to a priest. And if you go to some like priest who's so overworked and he doesn't understand and he's find someone else. Find a nun if you have to. Tell a friend. If you have kids and you're worried about those kids, bring your kids over to your girlfriend's house and say, I need you to watch these kids while I go and get some help or something. And I'm so sorry that I'm doing this. You can tell her that, but just find a way. Don't listen to the voice. Some of the worst voices are not the ones in your head. It's the ones online that would make you think that what you're hearing doesn't matter. God's peace be with each and every one of you, and good night. Oh, don't forget, we're going to be coming right back in a new thing. So if you want to join me, let me see where we're going to be at, actually. Let me open up my Kindle. This is not it. This is Moby Dick. So, see, that's another thing. I can have... How do I get out of here to get to my book? Well, how do I... Okay. Home. Well, where's my book? Oh no, it's showing me everything in here from my... I'm still learning. I think we're on like chapter 17 of Luke. But what it's showing is showing all of my books from... There it is. That's what I'm looking for. The Bible. Okay, now what? I think I left a bookmark somewhere. Back to page. There. Luke chapter 12. And by the way, this is a... some people find this Bible controversial, which of course is right up my alley. It is the New Living Translation. So if you looked at the scriptures that I was just reading, I love those scriptures and read by themselves. And if you look at the Bible I use to post, it's almost always the King James. Beautiful English, poetic, moving, right? But to sit down and just read it for an hour out loud, I'd be tongue-tied and all over the place. Doeth, shooteth, all these things. Whereas this was intentionally not translated, but it's presented to us in a very flowing modern English. So I hope you'll come back. Luke, we'll be in Luke Ironically, the opening tonight is Luke chapter 12, a warning against hypocrisy. So it fits in perfect. Good night. No hymn at the end of this, but we'll have plenty of hymns during the Bible reading. I'll take a short break and then launch a new stream. Peace be with you. And by the way, again, if you're in crisis of any kind, please go and get help. Good night.